Disclaimer: this channel's content is made for those above the age of 13. If you wish to know more, pause the video or check the bottom of the description.
Hey everybody, it's Alex and welcome back to another video, where today I'm continuing an idea that I had about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to continue my new Let's Talk About series. Last time I covered Metroid, and this time it's Pokemon. I recommend watching that video after this one, even if you aren't a fan of Metroid, as it will most likely be completely different in structure. Pokemon is my favorite franchise. As I mentioned last time, I played the game since 2008. When I played Pokemon Pearl for the first time, I knew I would instantly love it. I have a lot of nostalgia for the Pokemon series, and trust me, it was hard to look past this and just, not talk about like the inconsequential little details that I could just gush over for hours. I want to keep this video under 20 minutes, for editing and sanity's sake. Right now I'm working on Pokemon White playthrough on my channel, and that's where the majority of the footage I'm producing will come from. I'll also be taking footage from my Emerald randomizer, so take the Gen 3 Hoenn footage with a grain of salt when looking at the Pokemon that appear. If you don't know anything about Pokemon, first off, what's wrong with you? Second off, after I explain the premise of the series, I'll assume that you know at least a little bit about Pokemon. This is important, and you'll soon see why. Third off, I'll shut up and explain. Pokemon is a turn-based RPG series that now has over 1,000 unique monsters for you to collect, train, and battle. Despite that, the newest games only offer 400 of them, but that's a whole other can of worms I'll get into later. You can start a journey in your hometown, receive a Pokemon, and set off for real. The game is centered around defeating 8 gym leaders, or 7 trials if you're Sun and Moon and you decide to be special, which allows you to take on the Pokemon League and take on the champion of the region you're in. Every game also has an evil team in their main story, with all but the first, Team Rocket in Generations 1 and 2, to be clear, going after the game's box Legendary. Legendaries are super powerful Pokemon that play some importance, either in the story or just as a challenge. For example, the first games, Pokemon Red and Blue, have one main Legendary, a trio, which are the Legendary birds, and a mythical, Mew. Every generation would follow this structure with the new Legendaries, except for the newest one, Sword and Shield. The newer games have put twists on evil teams in some way, but it's mostly the same. Starting in Sun and Moon, the game hypes up this evil team that you think is going to be the main threat, when all of a sudden, boom! Random good guy is actually evil. And Sword and Shield did it at, the last second. Okay. That took way too long to set up for something I'm sure you all know, but I had to cover my bases. Especially because I want to talk about how genius this progression system is, and game style is. As of writing this, I've been doing a playthrough of Final Fantasy VII, the original one that was ported to the Switch. Final Fantasy VII is structured in a way that you fight through an area to get to a boss and stop the bad guy at the end of the journey. This is similar to Pokemon structure, however, where Pokemon pulls ahead of Final Fantasy VII is a sheer variety of party members. Almost every RPG has at least one NPC fighting alongside the main character. Pokemon is unique in allowing you to pick and choose out of a ton of party members. Like, a ton of party members. One significant change to Final Fantasy is how you actually get your party members. Find them out in the wild like you would with any other random encounter, and you can recruit them by catching them in a Pokeball. With this, what you have to do is you have to weaken them, and then throw the Pokeball. Then you have a chance to catch them based on their catch rate, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't even know if I could describe, if I'm being honest. In Final Fantasy, you just kind of get to the point of the story where the main characters are, and they just join your team with very little work, whether that be just instantly or you have to play a minigame first. In Pokemon, the catching and collecting aspects of the game are highly emphasized, especially in the early games, like in Red and Blue and Gold and Silver, when, there are specific milestones and prizes that you can get for catching so many Pokemon. Another change is that these Pokemon also change forms through different means, whether that be level up or exposing certain items or areas, or leveling up in certain areas, or in Sword and Shield, completing certain tasks. Final Fantasy VII, to my knowledge, doesn't really have a system similar to this, at all. You just get new party members as the game goes on. This is called evolution. Evolution not only increases things like their coolness level, sometimes, and their appeal, but it also increases their move pool, which are the moves that they can learn, and it also increases their base stats. Base stats are how Pokemon stats will be generally laid out as a species when they are hatched or caught. Some Pokemon are way, way better than others in this place, making them weaker than they would be if they had better base stats. For example, my favorite Pokemon is Zekrom, who is a legendary Pokemon of Pokemon White, not Black. He's Pokemon White. He is fairly strong with a base stat total of 680, with his highest stat being a monstrous attack stat of 150. We'll get into why this is important in a second. Meanwhile, a Pokemon like Sunkern has base stats of 30 all around, giving a BST, or base stat total, of only 180. So I could have like a level 100 Sunkern and against like my level 50, I don't know, Zekrom. And unless Zekrom's move was garbage for it and Sunkern had double team, Zekrom would win. Now, all this without mentioning the bigger battle features, natures for instance. It can raise or lower certain stats for either your detriment or for your help. For example, my Zekrom in my physical Pokemon White game has an adamant nature, which I didn't reset for because I was like 8 in 2011, which boosts his attack, which is really good for him, but it lowers his special attack, which is kind of bad but not really. Why is this? Well, the reason Pokemon have special attack and defense and not just a flat attack stat or a flat defense stat is because damage-dealing moves can either be physical or special. Prior to Gen 4, types were locked to physical or special, not the move. Higher physical defense will help defend against physical attacks. Higher physical attacks will increase the power of physical moves. Physical moves are indicated by this icon. Special attack and defense are the same, but the attacks are represented by this icon. HP and speed stats are the same as they would be in any turn-based RPG. But there is another. Status moves can do a variety of things. There are two types. Starting with stat-lowering moves, these moves add debuffs to stats to your opponent, or buff you. These can make it so your opponent can't hit you at all with moves like Minimize and Double Team, which raises evasion, or make it so they do garbage damage by raising your defense or lowering their attack. However, I recommend using buffs to yourself, as if your opponent switches, their buffs go away, if they have them, yeah, but also their debuffs. And you have to reapply those debuffs to the new Pokemon that comes out after you KO the first one. As another side note, critical hits ignore buffs and debuffs on the opponent, but not yours. So on top of the 1.5 times power boost, you can also ignore the defense boosts of either type. The status condition moves add even more debuffs to your opponent, but are often inaccurate in comparison to the other moves. They also cannot be removed by switching, and they need to be healed off with certain moves or items, with a few exceptions. There are several statuses. Confusion is the least reliable status. Confusion has a 50% chance to make the Pokemon afflicted with it hit itself. However, since it's a chance, Confusion could just not affect them. Paralysis makes the Pokemon slower and makes them have a chance to not be able to move. Sleep lasts 3 to 5 turns, and it makes it so that the Pokemon cannot move without fail. This also lowers wild Pokemon's catch rates. On the same note, Freeze is like Sleep, but it's a lot more inconsistent, with a 20% chance of ending every turn. However, it's super rare, and only available on small chances on Ice-type moves. It also lowers catch rate. Burns do steady damage each turn and lower the Pokemon afflicted with its physical attack. Poison is similar, but it's a consistent 1/8 max health damage. There are actually 2 subsets of poison as well. Leech Seed, which is its own move, and Toxic Poison. Toxic Poison is displayed in the game as quote-unquote badly poisoned. This means that the damage will escalate quickly and starts at 1/16 of the damage, then moves up to 1/8, 1/4, and so on. This only works with 3 moves though. You can only inflict toxic damage through Toxic, Poison Fang, which is a damaging move with a chance, and Toxic Spikes. Toxic Spikes are a subset of status move that either hurt or inflict a condition on a Pokemon when they enter a battle or switched in. They're called entry hazards. The 2 damaged ones are Stealth Rock and Spikes, a rock and ground move respectively, as well as the aforementioned Toxic Spike. All of this without mentioning the iconic type matchup system. It is extremely complex, but just know that this affects the damage output of moves. There are several types, however the game can only display one of them if they fall into a certain category. There are 3 major effects: super effective, not very effective, or not effective. There are 2 types of hits that can be super effective: 2 times and 4 times. Sticking with Zekrom, he has no 4 times weaknesses, but he has a 2 times weakness to ground, as he is an electric dragon Pokemon. He is also 10 times weak to dragon, fairy, I hate fairy types, and ice, because his type combo does not have a 4 times weakness, as dragon is not weak to something that electric is also weak to. This also means the biggest hit that he can take, could take, is a 2 times damage hit. Hydreigon, the Unova pseudo-legendary, has a 4 times weakness to fairy, because fairy is super effective on both dragon and dark, so it stacks. This means he takes 4 times damage from fairy attacks. Same thing with resistances. Staying in Unova, Amoonguss has a 1/4 times resistance to grass. That's because grass resists grass, and so does poison type. This means Amoonguss will take only a quarter damage from grass attacks, and it takes half damage from water, as grass resists water but poison doesn't. The only one that doesn't have a stacking system like this is immunities. They always do no damage. For example, ghosts can't be hit by fighting type attacks as they are immune. Now I mentioned move types. Let's talk about my favorite part of Pokemon, the team building and moveset creation. The first part is you have to catch a Pokemon, which I'm sure literally everybody knows how to do. You know, you weaken it, maybe status it, and then you throw a Pokeball at it, and then that's it. Each Pokemon can learn a set of moves called its Learn Set, and oftentimes the earlier the levels, the worse the move, although not always. However, something that's been there since the beginning changes the game completely. TMs. Prior to Gen 5's, TMs broke every time you used them. The TRs assumed this trait in Sword and Shield. These allow you to teach a Pokemon a new move from a set list in each generation. This also means that some Pokemon could learn moves that they otherwise couldn't. I love TMs and TRs so much. Finally, the last major mechanic that is essential to know about the actual Pokemon is abilities. They were not in Generations 1 and 2 as they were introduced in Generation 3. Abilities can do certain things that can either help or hinder you. For example, Inner Focus prevents flinching, which is something that some moves can do that stops you from moving if your opponent outspeeds. However, Truant makes it you can only move every other turn, which sucks. Most of the bad abilities are made to balance out stronger Pokemon. Now, the last thing about battling that doesn't really apply to Pokemon itself is the items. Items can apply certain perks when a Pokemon is holding it. You have items that are only good in single player, which are items like the Smoke Ball to make it easier to flee from any wild encounter, or the Amulet Coin, which grants extra prize money. There are also battle-oriented items like the Focus Sash, which gives you the ability to hang on from a hit that would kill you otherwise before breaking, or Leftovers, which can heal you for 1/16th of your max health. There are also a subset of items that just boost certain move types, like the Black Glasses for Dark type, or can boost certain types of moves, like the Binding Band for wrapping moves. All of this is just the basics of modern Pokemon. The basics. So get ready, because I still have plenty more mechanics to go. But first, let's take a step back and tell you why I like this. The combat is so deep, and I didn't master the basics until I had been playing for at least 5 years. Plus, on top of the Pokemon themselves and all their traits, there are specific items that can take away their glaring weaknesses. Like, let's just say a Pokemon was super slow. You could give them a Quick Claw to allow them to hit first sometimes. Or alternatively, you could decide to go with choice restrictions, meaning that you could only use one move until you switch, and use the Choice Scarf to boost speed. Or use the Choice Band to boost attack, so when you do wind up hitting, it hits like a truck. That's because choice items boost certain stats. The Choice Scarf boosts speed, the Choice Band boosts attack, and the Choice Specs, which I haven't mentioned yet, boosts special attack. This is so fun, and that's why I play this game competitively. And I make teams a ton, especially since I have some fun with it and make some weird picks on my team. Like, for example, my favorite competitive team, not my best one, mind you, my best one's in Sword and Shield, had a physical superior with Scope Lens in it, and get this, Return, Dragon Tail, Aerial Ace, and Leaf Blade. It originally had Choice Band, but then I decided against it. Then it was in Black and White, and now I have more options in Sword and Shield. Just to prove how intricate and complex this can get, I played a singles metagame with a Sand team back in Black and White 2 days. I had a Garchomp, Tyranitar, and Genesect. Couldn't use my Genesect in doubles as it was an event Pokemon. So, since I could have 4 instead of 3 in the doubles format, I got myself a Landorus T, replaced Genesect with a Scizor. This is what I love about Pokemon. The variety is endless, as long as you're playing Sun and Moon as the most recent entry. Before I start giving my opinions on any generation, I want to talk about 2 advanced features that have to do with Pokemon themselves. EVs and IVs. IVs stand for individual values, and they were called DVs, or determinate values, prior to Gen 3. IVs are given to a Pokemon when it is generated in the wild or through breeding, and they determine how high the base stats of the individual Pokemon can get eventually. I don't know how to determine how good IVs are, so I usually just have my friend who do it, who's pretty good at that stuff. I just mentioned breeding, and on top of getting the right nature, can also be a good way to get an infinite amount of one Pokemon for things like IVs and shininess. Sword and Shield added nature mints, so it's a bit easier to get the right nature in there, but in the older games, just breed. Breed can also give you egg moves, which happens when 2 different species of the same egg group breed, and the female's offspring can learn a move that the parent knows, by eventual level up, or TM or HM. You can also use an Everstone to pass down the mother's nature along, so using these techniques, you can create, a crazy Pokemon. In the new games, just use the nature mints, but in the old games, yeah, definitely use the Everstone. EVs are a bit different. EV stands for effort values. Every Pokemon ever gives EV points. EVs can be used to point your stat in the right direction. For example, if you grind out a ton of Tentacool, then you'll end up with a beefy special defense stat at level 100. You can defeat hundreds of multiple Pokemon to increase multiple stats, but be warned, you can only get so many EVs before it caps. This wasn't the case in Gen 2, though. You could get infinite amount of EVs there. I'm really good at EV training, and trust me when I say EV training is worth it. Do some research and figure out what Pokemon you need to knock out hundreds of to get the right EVs. Finally, my opinion on every generation. I may not have a whole lot to say, but I don't intend to say much anyways. Just because I'm not a huge fan of your favorite generation doesn't mean I hate it. I don't hate any generation. With that out of the way, here we go. Generation 1. Probably my least favorite generation. It's too slow for my tastes, and it's full of bugs as well as unfair bits surrounding psychic types. Generation 2. My second least favorite. They cut corners because of hardware limitations, and it's kind of dated, especially because Heart Gold and Soul Silver exist. Generation 3. My third favorite generation. Fire Red and Leaf Green are really fun, and a soft reboot for the franchise. I mean, the home games are great. Generation 4. My second favorite generation. Heart Gold and Soul Silver are phenomenal, and while I think Diamond and Pearl are still slow, I still like them. Platinum's okay. Generation 5, my favorite generation. I can't say much for reasons, but I will say this is the deepest Pokemon game, content-wise, and the soundtrack is a bop. I prefer Black and White 1 over Black and White 2, personally. Generation 6. I actually didn't like this generation. If all that came out was Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, then I may feel different. But I just don't like X and Y as much as I used to. Like, at all. Generation 7. My third least favorite generation, if you include the Let's Go games. I only played Sun and Moon, not the Ultra games, and I really didn't like the direction they took it. Let's Go was a fun distraction for a run or two. Generation 8. Okay, so Sword and Shield are hard to break for me. While I'm not as mad as some people were about the National Dex cut, it still stinks. And I wish that it hadn't happened. Sword and Shield does a lot right, and it adds a lot of convenience, but I did not like the lack of things to do outside the battle tower after the post-game story.
So that's it. My incoherent ramblings about Pokemon. This one was a lot easier to write, but the structure was thrown out the window. I hope you guys enjoyed, and nobody guessed in the comments, so I guess you'll just have to wait and see for a mysterious, mysterious video in your sub box. I specifically recorded this audio like a week later, so that I could give you guys time. So, yeah, that's all I got, and I guess I'll see you guys next time.
Game over. Continue.